like with Monica McDevitt, she gave me the opportunity to do stuff that was risky, innovative, and would be hopefully kind of pushing hard at the barriers. And so I was thinking quite hard about, well, what would that look like? And I felt like if we're focusing purely on formal education, we were going to miss communicating with young people where they spend their time, which is not basically in a classroom. And so I was just thinking with my own kids in mind about where are the biggest communication mediums in the world that kids do spend their time. And so we broke our strategy up into formal education, where we work on things such as look at green nudges, change mindsets. We're doing a lot of work with the Race to Zero to get universities to decarbonise. But then on non-formal education, we've created 2 projects. One is on something called the Tide Turners, where we're working with the Scouts, Girl Guides and Junior Achievement, which reached 90 million kids, on a new project called Earth Tribe, which is putting all the environmental education online in one curriculum so they can learn more there. And then the other one is gaming. And for me, I'm not really a gamer, but I get it. So we first started by commissioning a report, of which I've got a few on my desk, which really kind of made the case about what is it that's possible with gaming. I'm trying to share my screen, but I don't know if it's possible, David, whether you need to click a button, because there's a few things I wanted to show. And so the idea first was that we just wanted to make the case about why this issue. And what blew my mind was just the volume. So 1 in 3 people play games. The biggest markets are China, India, then you've got Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil. So it's not just North America and Europe, it's everywhere. Also, the scale is going to grow. So I think it is going to be the biggest kind of communications medium by none. It's just beating TV hands down. It's where kids go and play. It's where they go and socialize. So I think for me, if we're not in gaming, then where are we? And so we commissioned a report. We worked with Grid Arundel to do that. I just trying to turn on the share screen, so it should work now, David. Is it on? Not sure it is.
It should be on, Sam. It should be on. Can you try again?
Yeah, I'm clicking stuff, but nothing's happening. Let me try one more. Okay, no, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so first of all, we did the report, and that worked really well with Grid Arundel, and then we launched it at UNEP, and that made the case for why UNEP. I then spent probably far too much time in San Francisco, going to a bunch of studios to try and get them to engage on this agenda, and I met with Jim Ryan, who is the chief executive of Sony Interactive Entertainment, so Mr. PlayStation. I then set Jim a challenge to go and get Phil Spencer from Microsoft, who does Xbox, to do this, because if Sony's going to do it and Microsoft don't do it, then it doesn't make sense. I then set my targets on Supercell that had already committed to decarbonise to join the alliance, and they then said yes. And having those guys that do Clash Royale and all those games are just epic. And those 3 then validated everybody else coming on board. And so what we wanted to do was get an alliance ready for the UN Climate Summit last September, a year ago, to come forward and show their commitment to take action. And so pause in play was always a big issue on the PlayStation. So Sony kept making commitments, which I said weren't good enough, and they need to go back and kind of rinse the machine even harder to get the wattage right down. Other people made commitments which looked good on paper but weren't substantive enough. And so what we did is just ratchet up all their commitments from the alliance members to make them as solid as possible. And then last September, we announced the commitment of 21 companies to commit to either decarbonise some by 2040, 2030, or some even sooner, and to try and create a normative process within the industry whereby they're doing, say, one of 3 things. One is to just move to renewable energy. The other one is to think about how to put green activations in games. And the third one is to see how they can kind of rally around a cause. And so we now have members that have potential monthly reach of 1.2 billion gamers. And we've now got other platforms coming in like Unity that do 1/3 of the world's advertising in gaming who are joining next month. We've also got Bandai Namco who are going to join, probably with Pac-Man being a big ambassador on this agenda, and then a bunch of other games as well, which are cool. And so for us, what we're looking to do is really explore how in-game you can think about how you can carry messages in a way that's authentic and would inspire people. So if the bloody share screen thing would work, I could show you some of this stuff. And so
Sam, everything is saying that it should work. Can you just try one more time? Raise verify that you have access rights.
Yeah, you want to be looking at the rectangle with the arrow.
Yeah, I'm clicking around, Ray. I think it's fine. It'll come. I can just share a link in here so you can just read as we try and figure this out. And so we held our first ever Mobile Green Game Jam, which we did in, I think it was April, May this year. And so that, I think, was a massive eye-opener. And what we did for this is to get set a challenge that we worked on with them to see how they can really kind of move this agenda forward. And I just put a link in the chat that shows you the Mobile Green Game Jam. And so in this, we had 11 companies with a potential monthly reach of 250 million that worked on 4 different challenges to see how they could do different things within gameplay. So that ranges from Earth Wars and Transformers, working with Ren21 to show how you can use renewable energy, Subway Surfers, doing all kinds of stuff in the background of the game to show how you can restore landscapes, which they're going to grow. Hill Climb Racing 2, big game, my kids love it, which is all about moving to electric energy, I think, in some of the games. Puzzle games, WordBrain doing things, Angry Birds 2 doing a big restoration thing, Choices doing a massive kind of takeover of their game to move into climate, Animal Jam doing things on energy, Golf Clash. Golf Clash, I think I'm going to spend a bit of time on. Golf Clash is fascinating. It is a game that's played mainly by men of a certain persuasion, North America, European, who love golf. But the main designer of this game, Alex Rigby, wants to pull it apart and use the game to understand people's understanding of climate change, to bring climate change into the game, and to take the people that play the game on a journey to see how they can be educated through the content and make different choices. Now, this game is commercially very successful. It's owned by a brand that probably wouldn't want to do this, but they're exploring it. And so what I found fascinating about this initiative, and you can just scroll them through, is that each company came up with a different incentive or process to do. So Hungry Sharks are pushing kids to play this game, Arctic Extinction, and one of the incentives is you'll get a very special shark that you won't get unless you learn about different things. And so the Green Game Jam went very well. We're really pleased with the results, and it's been a real success. The BBC covered it, did a lovely job on it, and we've been asked by the UN president of the GA to showcase a short 2-minute film that we're going to show tomorrow in one of the 2-minute segments of the GA about what all the different gaming companies are going to do on biodiversity and restoration. And so we've got Sony made this film for us that we're going to show tomorrow. And so I think the green activations in games, I feel, is that's where the holy grail is, because I think if we can kind of shift behaviors through that process, I think that's going to do a lot of good work. The decarb stuff, I think, is just making sure that they think about how they can shut their back door strongly. And so we've got 2 working groups in the initiative. One is consoles, so Sony, Microsoft, some of the biggest studios, about what they can do there. And then on mobile, about how mobile companies can think about how they kind of either ask tougher questions of their server contracts that they have, and a lot of people are not happy with AWS, about what they can do to move their energy commitments there. And then the third thing I'd say is that we're probably going to look into how we can rally around one thematic that would make a difference. David, I don't think it's in a way worth me showing you this deck anymore because I've kind of talked it through. What I will do, which might be quite fun, is I might just share with you, David, if you could just play a film. So it's always nice to play a film. So you can see what we're going to be presenting tomorrow. So this is, we're just going to be playing this in that high level segment section. And I'm just going to ask David to see if he can do the necessary to play this. And after I've sent it, I'll just say two more things. So David, I'm sending it to you in the chat. So I think for the digital discovery, yeah, thanks, Ray. I'm just being I think there's a lot of human error in this, so I'm not sure why it's not working. I would say, for me, on the Playing for the Planet Alliances, doing the report set the foundations for what we're trying to do that gave us permission to have an opinion on this. Getting some of the biggest gaming companies in the world to commit to do something on this validated the initiative. And because UNEP was asking them, they said yes. I think it was Greenpeace or any other entity, they would probably say no. So I think our status gave them confidence that they should do this. We have been unrelentingly tenacious to kind of force it with lots of folks to get them on board. And then I think the Green Game Jam made the companies feel that they could do activations in games that retained the authenticity of the game design, kept it fun, and the gamers wanted it. And also, I think the bushfires in California, where the bulk of this industry is based, has made the gaming industry realize that actually climate change is here and now. And the pressure from staff for them to engage in this is like off the charts. And so we have had EA, who we've had long conversations with, suddenly commit to say they want to get involved in this, and they do FIFA and a bunch of other very big games. And many other gaming studios are keen to engage in this. The thing that we haven't done, again, that we might look into, one is about fundraising. I haven't touched that because I think you can just offset a commitment by just giving money, but there's a lot of money in gaming that we could generate. And I think this initiative has lots of promise. And so, David, I think this film should work. And I'm sorry I've not been able to share screen, but I can share some more information about what we're looking to do. But maybe, David, if you see if this works audio-wise, and then I'll just say two other things off the back of it. Thank you.
Okay, let's try and see if it works.
There's no audio, David.
David, did you enable system audio before you share the screen?
Hey, David, yeah, you do need to unshare and then share again, having clicked that enable system audio. Over.
Yeah, I'm looking for that. Where is that particular function?
So as you click on the rectangle to share, you'll see which window, and then just above all the windows, there's a little include computer sound.
Gotcha.
Little toggle.
Yep, gotcha. Thank you. Sorry for that. In my panic to get this right, I logged out of the platform.
Today, around 1 in 3 people around the world play video games. It's now the biggest entertainment medium, bar none. From young to old, people are united in play. But what if video games could also help us tackle the biggest environmental challenges of our time? Launched in 2019, the Playing for the Planet Alliance aims to harness the reach and creativity of the video gaming industry to engage and empower their communities around the world. For the first time, the gaming industry has come together to explore how they can encourage players to protect nature and biodiversity through actions in the games themselves. Mobile games that reach 250 million people are now informing players and encouraging them to contribute to reforestation, hosting in-game events to protect wildlife, educating gamers about ecosystems and biodiversity, and showing how communities can come together to tackle local environmental problems. Supported by the United Nations Environment Programme, the initiative has secured commitments from some of the most influential names in the gaming industry to reduce their carbon footprint and take environmental action. Mobile and console companies that are used to competing are now collaborating, sharing experiences, and learning from each other. By harnessing the power of video games, we can preserve nature and biodiversity and empower communities to act. We have no time to lose. Together we must play for the planet.
Thanks, David. So just 3 other points I'd say is I wanted to take a systemic approach to shift an industry rather than just create a game. And so sometimes I think a lot of people just create games which are just one-offs, whereas I think if you move a whole sector with, say, principles of game design, it becomes a normative process across the sector. And so I think that's what this has started to do. And it's only 1 year old, so it's still too early to say whether it will be successful. I think it will. I'd also say my other thing is for 2021, we're looking to scale this further. And so to get studios with a combined monthly reach of 2 billion. And I think we probably can do that if we try hard enough. And for the Green Game Jam, we're going to probably have some other very big games involved in that. So Minecraft and others to really kind of move around this agenda. And also what we're going to look to do is to work with some of the trade bodies that represent the gaming industry so they can take this agenda on. So it's not just dependent on UNEP to keep kind of banging people on the heads, but they kind of take responsibility for this agenda as well. And the last thing I'd say is I think the pressure from staff on this who work in studios about where is the right place to go and that retention challenge that they face means that they kind of have to do this. So my last thing I'd say is we're looking to do this kind of approach, not just with video gaming, but with TED Ed. We've done that with Earth School, which is to think about how do we aggregate the best environmental education lessons, place it on a well-known platform and brand, and try and get different partners to kind of distribute that out. And so that worked well last year with a lot of David support, which reached kind of over millions of people through that. And we're also looking to do the same with LinkedIn on green jobs. So the idea we have there is LinkedIn reaches 660 million people every year. But what if we got LinkedIn to think about how it could promote green job opportunities, green skill sets, and help to move that agenda forward? And so for me, whenever we're doing our work here, my first question is where is the scale and who are the partners that can help us hit that kind of scale? And how can we transform an industry from where it is to where we want it to be? And what are the opportunities through that kind of engagement for kind of a surprising outcomes to flow off the back of it? And I think with Earth School, I think that's pretty cool. I think with the Scouts with Earth Tribe, I think that has promise. But for the gaming stuff, for me, what's been great about this is nobody's really done this before, so it's kind of open territory to try something new. And I think my big message to all those on that call is UNEP turning up into a digital space saying, we have an idea, we think we can do this with you, is very, very attractive. But we need to be very clear about what is our kind of role, what is their responsibility, and how do we kind of stop off on these things. I feel like David on digital transformation for the MTS, I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us to do more of this kind of work. So I'll leave it there, and thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you.
Thanks very much, Sam. We'll get into some questions and answers now. But you know, when we talk about digital transformation, a lot of colleagues would like a practical example of what exactly that means. And I think this is such a good example. And your quote about not just building a game, but a systematic approach to shifting an entire industry, I think that's exactly the kind of right mindset to be thinking about when we talk about digital transformation. When we talk about, you know, where do we have influence and reach, and how do we affect the decisions and lives of billions? This is the exact kind of scale that we're seeking. So I really applaud your efforts here and your leadership here. And let's open the floor for questions. Who has the first question for Sam about insights from this whole process? If you can use the hand function, I will call on people with their hands up. Isaac, over to you.
This reminds me when I was a little bit younger and I used to really game a lot, and Need for Speed Most Wanted being one of my favorites. So it's really touching me when I see this kind of development happening. And the question then I have is, how can then have, let's say, the game developers provide us with some form of information that basically help us show the impact that these games have, especially after they've been pimped up with the environment thematic areas like climate change and the likes. So an example would be, are the game developers able to show that, let's say, after you've had a game where you're supposed to plant a few trees here and there, and then actually somebody was inspired, and then they probably have a social aspects of it where now the gamers are able to post photos showing them that they have actually planted trees. It's a lame example, but that's just a thought. Over.
So basically, how do you judge the metrics this is having a positive impact, and do the gamers themselves, do the game companies themselves have a way of measuring the kind of behavioral change that you're inspiring through the games?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Isaac. So Matthias, who's the head of Subway Surfers Cyber, said that as long as it's not net negative, then that's great for me. If it's net neutral, that I can do this stuff and it doesn't turn people off, awesome. So that's one insight from the industry. I think the Green Game Jam, what's been beautiful about that is kind of consolidated principles for how to do this well. So John Erner wrote a blog on Space8, on the Space8 blog, which I can just share about what their learnings were. So I can just drop that in here into the chat as well. And I think for me, there's lots of good kind of insights and examples that we've got from the Green Game Jam. All those games are pretty much live now. And so we will get data and insight from the current jam about which we can, about what works, what doesn't work, how we can improve. And so there's a commitment to be open source on all those insights as well. So this is the John Erner stuff I'll just drop in. And then my other thing is also Google Play, Play Store that kind of promotes all these games. They've offered to promote every single game that has done something on this agenda from October the 19th for a week. And so there's something like, there's a carrot and stick approach, as well as a moral kind of middle, if you like. And so Google are looking to incentivize more people to do the good stuff on this. So I would say, Isaac, yes, the Green Game Jam will have insight. I think the CEOs really matter if they're keen to do this, but also we can create incentives for more good stuff to happen off the back of it.
Thanks, Sam. I see a hand up from, I think it's Tim. Yeah, Tim, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks, Sam. It was absolutely great to work together with you, of course, on this, and also on the discovery session with these gaming industries. And yeah, I think I learned a lot, and the other colleagues working across UNEP on this also, I'm sure. So 2 points. One is, so if this is level 1 of what we're doing with the gaming industry, what is level 2? Because the big opportunity here is that if we get an audience hooked on environmental nudges and engaging with us, what does level 2, 3, 4 look like? How can people get more engaged? How can they be involved in citizen science, for example? So I think thinking that through would be very good. And then just a note on the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. As we move towards the launch in early 2021, we of course love to continue this work with the gaming industry and involve them in some big way towards the launch. And when we have the logo of the decade, distributed to all these various partners that we'll be working with, it'd be great to continue that with the gaming industry as well.
Thanks very much, Tim.
I would say level 2, I mean, the way I think about it is that each company is in a very different place. Some are up here, some haven't even started. So what I'm trying to do is just level the field first with just some basic approaches, and so everyone knows roughly what they need to do. There is some kind of insane leadership that's coming through. And the good thing about this industry is very competitive. So if somebody does something, they're a bit like, well, I want to do that. Then so it kind of ratchets up, which is great. We set ourselves a target for 2020 to scale the initiative from the reach of 1.2 billion to 2 billion, which we've done. We've set ourselves the objective to try and get a half-decent website that we can be vaguely proud of, which I think we've done. We've set ourselves the objective about getting a green game jam. We wanted to reach 1 billion, but we've got 250 million. I think we'll take it. But for 2021, Tim, I think what I wanted to do this year was just check the thing worked, make sure that the industry wasn't just full of kind of nutcases who talked and then didn't deliver. And so this year was just more of the due diligence year to see what was possible. The 2021 year, I think, is where it gets a lot more exciting. And so I think how we determine the level 2, I think, is a dance with the gaming industry as well to see what they think is possible. So they need to show that level of ownership and commitment. But I do think, as you know, the work we have with Mark Radker talking to them all about energy, the work that you did about restoration, the other people that spoke to them about marine, I think what we're looking to do is inculcate a sense of the environment writ large rather than specific initiative A, B, and C. And so I think that for the decade and for other things, there are opportunities there. But I'm also leaning back a bit, so I don't just say, today it's this, tomorrow it's that, and Thursday it's this, and then they'll just be a bit like, well, what do you want us to do? So I'm just breathing in a little bit now, between now and the end of the year, and trying to make strong recommendations about what I think would make sense, so their commitments ladder up, so we can see the outcome, as opposed to a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other. So I think that's, I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but it gives you like a sense of the approach I'm going to take. And also the way I'm thinking about this is like, I'm quite careful with the initiative because I think it's quite precious and I don't want to break it, but I'm also open-hearted and open-minded about if there are really good things about what else UNEP's doing that could be useful for these guys, then the door is open, not locked, for those kind of contributions.
Thanks, Sam. And I think the other point you're also making is that you're basically being very agile and adaptive, and you're understanding what the market wants, how the market is reacting to this, how the partners are reacting, and then how you build on that, which is very much kind of one of those digital mindsets that we all need to learn from. Maybe I'll switch it back to the list of questions. We've got 4 hands up. I'd like to ask Sophie Clausen if she could take the floor and ask her question.
Thank you, David. Hey, Sam. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's very inspiring, and I agree with the approach of addressing it as a systemic issue and sort of not focus on creating a one-off game, but really looking at the industry more as a whole. And in relation to that, I'm thinking of 2 specific other parts of the industry that we haven't touched upon yet today. One being, considering that the esports and gaming industry is $1 billion industry, and which is now considered bigger than all other entertainment industries combined. In particular, looking at esports, are there any plans to engage esports teams in competitions in relation to this, which also offers an additional large platform, right, to reach out through different, and I know you're collaborating with Twitch, so I thought there might be some conversations on that already. The other part being in terms of the hardware used for gaming, so looking at the supply chain of gaming equipment as well, and if there's any ideas of collaborating with Razer or any other of the big sort of gaming companies to work on their supply chain and value chains in relation to environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sophie. So we had an MOU with ISFE, the International Federation of Esports, I think it is. Said it wrong, and they were very keen to do stuff, but then didn't really do anything. So I think we have that relationship, and I think we can go back to it because it's big in Korea and elsewhere. But my feeling was I'd rather focus on those that make the games that reach the millions, rather than those that play the games that still then get watched by. More people watch other people playing games than watch the combined audience, I think, of CNN, a bunch of other media outlets, which just kind of blows your mind as a parent. So, and I've got it upstairs with my 11-year-old. So I think esports, yes. I think for me that's kind of phase 2, 3. I think we'll come to that once I think we've got the principles of game design and decarbonisation established. And I think that's what we can move up to. In terms of hardware use, I think that 2 things are fascinating. The threat of regulation from the European Union is scaring the hell out of Sony. And I keep telling Sony they need to take it seriously. So I think that's quite helpful to have that pressure from regulators. which is probably the incentive why they're doing so much work on this agenda. But then I'd also say the whole cloud versus console debate about what is greener is something I haven't got into the weeds on, because I think I want to kind of step back from kind of casting judgment on those two areas. But it's an interesting space to be in. My take on that is depends how you play the game, depends on your energy source, and whether you snack on games on mobile, then that's probably better. But if you play a game for a long period of time, then console might win. And the new PS5, they've rinsed out a ton of the wattage, so it's probably similar to a PS4 Plus. And they're looking to see what else they can do to bring it right down. And normally with every new console, because the power and the graphics cards are even stronger, that's unlikely. So I think the whole thing about circular economy, I think Sony definitely get that. I think Microsoft get it as well. But e-waste is just off the charts nuts bad. And these guys are victims of the inability to really deal with that. And I do think it's interesting for me about where does e-waste sit in technology, because only 20% of e-waste I think is dealt with. I'm sure Kevin will tell me more than that. And I think that's curious for me about what else do we do with the legacy of gaming, and how else could we play a role in that? And so I think that's curious. On peripherals, we've had Logitech keen to get involved. I want to make a commitment that Playing for the Planet is for people that make a game, because otherwise we're going to have all kinds of headphone manufacturers and all kinds of stuff, and will be a bit confusing about what it is and what it isn't. But I think there is an opportunity, again, depending on the maturity of the Playing for the Planet Alliance, to see what else we can do. And I think that circular economy approach, I think maybe, Sophie, what we could do is bring you into a discussion with Microsoft and Sony and maybe some of the others in the next couple of weeks or months to see what we can do on that agenda if you're keen to participate.
Thank you, Sam. That would be great. I think that's something where the One Planet Network in particular also can step in and have some opportunities for facilitating some of that. Right. So please, yeah, share with me in a meeting or an email. We'll get on it.
Super. Thanks, Sophie.
Thanks for the question, Sophie. I can see some colleagues have to head off for the meeting. I wanted to give the floor to Brennan for her question before she needs to head out. Brennan?
Thanks, David. So this is, really great. The audience is tremendous. Although I want to echo Kevin's comment, which I hadn't thought about before, which is, it's important to do some kind of, or to take it into consideration some of the problems with the gaming industry, the violence, the sexism, the et cetera, as we associate ourselves with it. But I still think it's a fabulous idea and has a lot of potential. What my question is there are aspects of moving forward on environmental issues that are complicated, and I'm wondering, in your experience, how much something like this gaming industry can help folks to understand, for example, the interlinkages between environment and the economy and economics and economic development. I think that, as we all know, we're not going to get where we need to go without shifting private sector flows, without getting economic ministries, et cetera, to start thinking about the natural capital inputs into economic development and engines of growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those are very complex issues. That issue, others like it, equally complex. Does this platform, does this way of communicating lend itself at all to a more complex way of looking at our issues?
Thanks, Brennan.
I think there are some games that really play into this space very strongly, and I think what we might need to do is do some segregation of games that have reach with games that have purpose. I think Minecraft just kind of ticks every box possible on this in terms of audience size of 157 million. The chief of staff of that studio, Amy Stillian, is very open to this work and is keen to do more. And so I think also, to Kevin's point, I think from our side, a lot of the studios that we work with, some of them do produce games that we probably wouldn't approve of or agree with or let our kids play. And I think that for me is like one of those kind of slight tensions in this, that we don't have a formal MOU with anyone because we're here to facilitate the industry to do good stuff. And I think some of the most toxic games we don't really engage with, but they are played on platforms we do have a relationship with. And so, Brendan, I don't think I've answered your question, but I do think there's a question for me, like a thought in response to that, which is, how could we help the game designers and creators think about how more real world events could be brought into the game that they could maybe kind of get people to consider? Or how could gaming challenges have design components that are related to the environment / ecosystem tensions that we face as well? And for me, maybe what we could do in the Green Game Jam for 2022, so 2021, I think is going to be focused on one theme to see what that does. But I think what we could do, Brennan, is pick off some of the gaming studios that we think have some strong latent interest in that kind of agenda, and maybe we could go a bit deeper with them. I think you've seen from the stuff from Sony and what they're doing on AR and VR, that there's all kinds of stuff happening on that agenda there. And I think there is, I think that's an interesting question, and I'd welcome the chance to talk about that with you with a bit more. So it's not something, I've been not propositional that hard yet, but I think we could get there.
Okay, great. I would very much welcome further discussion, and also, you know, obviously, Sam, as you know, to the extent that we can be helpful, especially the Enabling Innovation Unit, you know, let us know, because we'll try to support in any way we can.
Right. Thanks, Brad.
And just to highlight that we've been in conversations with a group called EarthX to perhaps do a one-day exploratory session where we look at how different AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality headsets are being used for environmental communication purposes and immersive experiences. And we're looking at doing that sometime in January, February of 2021, where we're bringing together UNEP, WWF, Conservation International, IUCN, and anybody else in this space that's kind of using VR and AR for environmental education and for environmental immersion. So we'll keep you posted on that. If that goes ahead, I think that would also help offer a platform to answer your question. Let's go back to the list of hands, if that's okay. I think, Tim, your hand is up again. If you could put your hand down. I think Matthew is next. Matthew, go ahead, please.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Sam, for the presentation. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yeah, I'm really quite inspired by the direction and the strategy you're putting forward. I, like so many others, seem to have to go to a slightly less interesting meeting than this, which is a real shame, but I will have to jump in a second. Just a couple of points, put it in the chat box. But a few years ago in the Europe office, Jan Dusik and colleagues, we signed an MOU with Dutch EduGIS, or EduGIS. And this was around the GeoCraft, EcoCraft module that fits in to the Minecraft. I've put the link for the press release. At the time, we thought it was innovative, interesting, but really I think all we did was put our logo on it and Jan went to the launch. There's a huge potential there. I don't know your contacts with Minecraft, but they are a very wealthy partner as well. One of the few people who didn't ask us for any financial contributions. They wanted our support. So I think that ball was dropped, and I think that ball should be back in play, and we can talk bilaterally and I can dig out some information and try and help. But I think that's, depending on what level you're already integrated into the Minecraft world, you know, I stand ready to try and give you some of the historical information. The second point and final point is around CERN here in Switzerland. Traditionally, they've run hackathons, and I've seen from the chat it's not really our ambition to create a UNEP game or a UN game, but we thought about collaborating with CERN to run a hackathon related to science and some of the SDG indicators. It was Gillian Campbell and myself at the time. This didn't materialize, but the idea was quite solid. So if we want to use a partner such as CERN, who can bring the sort of hackathon community together to introduce elements of environmental aspects or the environmental dimension into existing games, or, you know, that we could leverage this. It's an idea, it's again to do with partnerships. I know we're at the strategy level at the moment, but they are the 2 points that I could sort of maybe offer into this conversation. And once again, thank you for an excellent presentation and initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew, and thanks again for also that spirit of internal collaboration and how do we amplify and take forward and build on some of this this amazing work. I think those were both offers, and so if Sam, you want to, maybe I'll just go back to the floor, and then Sam can maybe respond to the offer and the next question as we go back. I think Mushtaq, you have your hand up for a while. Mushtaq, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you, David. Okay, so I'm now coming from our I would say UNEP's strong entry point, that's e-waste, energy efficiency, resource efficiency. As UNEP has been like all the more than 10, 15 years I was with ITC, and all this we developed a lot on the e-waste, including the take-back systems, so e-waste from ICTs, from the cooling equipment, and all this. So when we look in the horizon for the gaming, it's not only about the consoles, batteries, and all this, but also the cloud computing or cloud storage and everything. So you name it, you have it. So the scale is huge in terms of e-waste, in terms of energy efficiency, resource efficiency. And I think we already have quite a lot of experience, strength, and so on. So we can try to link both sides. So I would suggest, and I can offer also my support on that, if there's a need be, that on e-waste, energy efficiency, and resource efficiency, and for gaming, because like suppose the complexity, suppose the food packaging and plastics we are working, but in some cases like Coca-Cola, others, though we do not support the Coca-Cola itself as a food, but we had to work with them on the cooling industries because of ozone, the plastics and packaging. So this is quite a complex way that we have to support the things, because on other end, we can achieve some environmental benefits. So same with the gaming industry as well. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mushtaq. Sam, do you want to reply to both those offers?
So Minecraft was made by a third party that was then bought by Microsoft, I think. So I'd be curious to work out who the other parties from Matthew, and happy to pick up the call and just figure that out. I think that's interesting. I think CERN and another opportunity with them with things. I think that might connect to Brennan's idea about, are there some really big ideas that we would like the industry to work with us on, which are different challenges in scope, and maybe CERN could be a partner in that dialogue, perhaps. I think our bandwidth at the moment is only really able to cope with one large green game jam a year, rather than kind of individual ones. But it might be with the Europeans, so ISFE, which is the European Federation of Games Manufacturers. Maybe they'd be keen to explore something along those lines with them for what they do. And we also do a lot of work with the Paris Games Week and Gamescom in Germany as well. So it could be, Matthew, I think my bandwidth to cope with another green game jam doesn't exist, but I'd be curious to see if there's something in that we could explore. And then on e-waste, I think, Mushtaq, for me, if we have good guidance, good principles, good directions that we could recommend to the sector about what should they do, and if there's kind of suggestions on this, then I think people are really open on best practice, and they're willing to communicate to their consumers about what they should do better. I mean, I just got a PS4 not long ago, and that's got a ton of stuff about the ecological footprint of the product. So I do think they do some consumer information pretty well, but I think we could do a better job on that as well. So I feel I'm really open to good ideas on e-waste, and I think, Matthew, I'll drop you a note offline so we can take it forward.
Thanks, Sam. Let's go over to James, who has also been very keen to ask his question. James, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, David. Sam, good to see you. I know you mentioned that you're not you spend a lot of time in San Francisco, but I was wondering whether you have given any thought of attending the video game UNEP. I think they call it E3, or the Electronic Entertainment Expo, which is a trade event for fans, developers, gamers, and it could be a very good place for you to showcase or connect and just link up with this whole world. I mean, people coming from all over the world to attend this thing in California. And second, just a second comment, has there been any thought regarding any form of certification? I mean, I know we do some form of UNEP works on environmental certification and this kind of thing. You just mentioned that the PS4, and I'm sure even the PS5 now has a lot of, packaging and a lot of content regarding its ecological footprint, but it may be, a good idea to move the lens towards some form of certification in the gaming industry. Over.
So yeah, E3 in LA is a big one. Not been there, but may do at some point, although carbon footprint, etc., etc. Certification is a great question, James. So Unity run 50 to 60% of all mobile games in the world, and their CEO is kind of foaming at the mouth with enthusiasm about what they could do. And so they've got a whole green game certification concept in their minds. And I'm like, oh God, that sounds like a huge legacy horror show. But it could be really interesting. And Google Play have another idea about how do you either to put a green stamp on a game that's made in the right way with the right insights, the right principles. So I think there's really something in that. I would welcome like anyone's kind of smarts and kind of intelligence to think that through, because I think there's huge potential to do that. And just to build on that, the other thing I'm trying to get gaming companies to do is to either understand what is the interest or demand from gamers for more of this kind of content. So I think there was a question on Pokemon Go, and I was with Niantic last week, just talking about how could they get insight from those that are out and about playing games in nature about the value of nature to them, because then you can then push that up to say, actually, you should be doing this because the community wants it. So two different things in there. Certification, I've just made a note in my notebook to kind of write that in red to come back to. And it sounds like, James, you might have some ideas on that. And then also about consumer insight, about how much the gamers want it. We are going to look to see if we can get 10 different companies to get insight from gamers about whether this is substance they care about or don't care about. We need to be careful about what games we ask that question to, because I don't want it to be negative. So I'm going to be quite careful about the ones I select, so we can get insight about the demand.
Thanks very much, Sam. And I think this question about green certifications, I mean, the risk if we don't engage is a fragmentation of different certifications in different countries and regions, which becomes a mess, right? So at some point, there's going to need to be some kind of international standard in how these things are certified. So I think there is a role we could play. As you say, how do we play that role effectively and efficiently is the key question. But I think there's no question about a future role there. I'm looking to see if there are other hands up. We've got 8 minutes left in the session. I think I saw that Marie had put some questions in the chat, and I wanted to ask if Marie would take the floor to ask those questions to Sam.
Hi, Sam. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was great. And my question was about the Pokemon Go game and how we can actually incentivize gamers to go beyond just getting messages about environmental awareness and really translate that into action in their local environment. So yeah, Sam touched upon this, but maybe I don't know if he has any more thoughts on this to expand.
So the way I frame it, Marie, is just like there's an axis. One is informational, like here's some good stuff you should know about. The other one is maybe incentive. So if you do this, then you can get that. The other one is activational. So we want our community to do this, and this is what we believe in. And then at the top end, there's a whole other kind of higher end spectrum that you can engage in. And so for me, what we've done with the industry on the Green Game Jam is to say, we want you to kind of get here, but we understand that it's a journey for the studios to walk on. So some of them are over here and some of them are up in this space here. So the way we framed this for the industry is to think about there's an axis of opportunity depending on your bravery. And the Playdemic example I gave you on Golf Clash is kind of nuts. Like what they're trying to do in a golf game is just shows the level of courage and bravery they're prepared to take on a game to make a difference. And so I feel like for me on this, I want to be kind of like, calling for them to play to their strengths, which is creativity, understand their audience. It's not for me to preach to it. And I have had a lot of pushback, particularly from 2 or 3 big studios that says, if you start telling my studio heads what to do, they're going to shut the door and they're going to say, just get out of our face. So we have to be very careful about this. And so for me, it's just more walking a journey with them to say, inspiration, you could do this, it'd be amazing, game changer, never been done before, let's see what you can do. And so that's my pitch. And then I frame like that axis of opportunities about what they could do. And then I say, well, they're doing this and you're only doing this, so why don't you do that? So the way I work with them is more on a case-by-case basis to move all of the boats in the harbour up, which I don't think asks your question that well, but I think for me, it's better to be propositional about the opportunity specific around the activation, because if you get too specific around the activation, they'll just kind of spit it back at you. So I think that's the approach that I take.
Can I follow up on that question, Sam, just in terms of, as you say, like talking with the companies, how did you, like, what language did you use to inspire them or to incentivize them? Like, did you adopt our language inside UNEP, or did you try to learn their language and speak in their terms? Like, how did you, what incentives did you kind of spin this around, and what was the value proposition you tried to market around? If you could talk about that, thanks.
I think I was just myself, probably. I don't think there's any kind of magic to it. It's just a case of, this industry's not done this before. We want to help make good things happen in the world. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? And then here are some really good examples that you could learn from. Join a call where you can learn from colleagues on this. There's a whole load of FOMO in that, so fear of missing out, oh, I can't miss this. So there's a bit of that we played on. And then it's building specific individual relationships with the CEOs of the companies to make them feel like we were giving them the kind of support and the guidance for their leadership to have a backstop, that they didn't feel like they were going out there and being vulnerable and then just being exposed. And I think for me, like life, it's all about personal relationships, and it's about how you win the sense of the possibility and inspire people to a sense of agency that they didn't think was within themselves. And so for me, that whole kind of calling into leadership and saying, Jim Ryan, you're going to leave Sony probably in 2 years' time. What do you want to be remembered for? Is it yet another PS5, or is it making a difference? You've got an 11-year-old kid, same age as my son. What kind of planet do you want them to live on? And it's that same kind of agency. It's nothing kind of complex. It's just that kind of approach.
Thanks for that, Sam. We have to wrap up. We've got 4 minutes left. I can see one hand up, or one hand was up from, I believe it was Nora. Nora and Alejandro both had their hands up. Do either of you want to come in with a question for Sam? Okay, I think their hands have been taken down. Thomas, do you want to come in with a question or a comment? All right, I think maybe our colleagues have spent their questions.
Hi,
oh, wait a sec, sorry. Go ahead, Nora.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, it takes a while to unmute sometimes. I was just wondering if the different environmental issues that are obviously different in the global regions are also sort of tailored to the users in different global regions. So someone, for example, in the global south who's mostly probably affected by drought and such issues might not be as interested or as moved by changes in the Arctic, for example. So I'm just wondering about that representation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. I think there's certain thematics that are easy to work with, but I don't think there's any issue that can't be taken forward. It depends, again, on the presentation and keeping it authentic within the game, so it's not like this clunking appearance that suddenly everyone goes, well, what are you trying to do to me? And I think there's something about being very smart about the presentation of it and allowing people to opt in and participate makes sense. And I also want to say that we do have some really tiny studios in the Alliance, so it's not just the mega big ones, they're all small ones. And we're also very keen to have like a globally diverse footprint. So we've got Kenya, India, Brazil, China. I want to do a bit more in Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia as well. So I think, like Richard Manang also made a point about getting some of the other studios. Nigeria's got a big emerging place in that space. But I'm trying to manage that balance between scale, like 2.7 billion. That's my kind of thing that I have in my head, while also just being equitable at the same time. So I didn't really answer your question, Nora, but I hope I kind of scratched on it.
But I think, Sam, as well, the question is, going forward, can a game customize the experience for the end user based on their geographic location? So could the game, offer different content based on where you're located?
Yeah, and they do already. Many of them are licensed already. So they're licensed to different geographies. They're tailored through the store to different kind of locations. So there's a whole load of agility in the presentation of games.
Yeah, thanks. And I think going forward, that'll be increasingly important. We are now at the end of our session. So let me take the opportunity to really thank Sam and all of the colleagues in his team and all the collaborators that have worked on these various projects. As the colleague said, this is really a massive source of inspiration. This must be a pillar of our digital transformation work going forward. And I really thank you, Sam. As you say, the approach really has to be shifting an industry, finding scale, and offering the sense of the possible, and then really inspiring agency for those that can have influence. So thank you so much, Sam, for leading the way and inspiring us. And we look forward to working with you and really helping to amplify this further going forward.
Cheers, David. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, happy to answer questions on email or anything else. Appreciate the chance to speak to you all.
Cheers. Cheers, everyone. Thanks again for attending.